Hi, everyone. Today, me and Tete, well, actually her, because I did not watch it yet, she's going to be reviewing the recent Batman movie, The Batman. And I'm going to be asking her some questions to get, what her idea of this movie is and what she thinks about it.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. I went to see it last week exactly. In fact, at this time, I was still at the movie theater, still enthralled as the credits were rolling by the sheer power of this movie. The hype delivered. It was not hype, it delivered so hard that it unhyped the hype.
What were your expectations for this movie walking in? Did the movie meet these expectations? From what you just said, definitely.
I my expectations from the beginning, well, I would say initially I had low expectations. The casting seemed strange. I mean, Pattinson from Twilight era, um, and other weird franchises as Batman. I thought, that's going to be so strange. I mean, usually Batman's like this male powered fantasy thing of machismo or something. How is Pattinson, who is like a twinkly vampire, going to pull this off? But then I went on Tumblr, and Tumblr showed me many gifs and thoughtful posts and pictures and video clips. And I thought, oh my, he's doing something very radical with this portrayal. The director's brilliant. I mean, Matt Reeves is just completely iconoclast the character. This might be actually good. And then I began to see more and more clips. I saw fans' reactions, and I thought, well, the fans who don't like it, I know I can trust their judgment because whoever says it's bad is usually just a Bat fanboy. However, people who did like it were people who were not normally DC or Batman fans, and they loved it. And even those who were also loved the nuance and iconoclasm. So I thought, my expectations are high. Please deliver. I also began to see some of the chemistry shared between Pattinson and Kravitz, as Bruce and Selena, respectively. And I thought, this is going to be beautiful. Bruce is like a dark, intense, brooding demon. I thought, we all know how I react to, dark, tense, and brooding, demon like men. Like, oh, my goth prince has arrived. I'm like, yay. And I went into the theater. I was hyped. I was pumped. I was pumped beyond belief. And it delivered beyond belief. It wowed me. In fact, a lot of the plot and the characterization took me by surprise. So I was wowed. The movie not only met them, but it took them up to the stratosphere.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yes, from what I've seen, this movie was very impressive and, from what you have shared. And guys, if you want to read Tete's full review of the series and, sorry, not the series, the movie and a breakdown of the themes in it, check out the essay that she's written for it. It's linked in the description.
Thank you guys. Please check it out. If you want to have a fun review with no spoilers, maybe a spoiler here and there, you're more than welcome to check it out.
So, what was your favorite part of the movie?
There are many parts, but without revealing spoilers, I had several. The first one was this montage of seeing Bruce kind of set out his network, that he's not always just donning on the Batman outfit and gadgets and whatnot. He still hasn't really perfected the suit. He doesn't have all the cool, amazing tech gadgets yet, or the gimmick of the trade, if you will. And he's actually out in ordinary civilian clothing, and he uses kind of like this eyeshadow makeup, almost like combat camouflage, which I thought was an interesting detail. um, which a lot of people who have been in law enforcement and military, I had an acquaintance who was in law enforcement and military, tells me that people who are doing like recon or anything like that, they do use that because a lot of times the light reflected in your eyes can give away your presence, so you want to make yourself as dark as you can. So that was an
That makes
interesting
sense.
interesting detail. um But and it just showed the rawness of Bruce's pursuit of vengeance and retribution in the city. And he's just so like soaked to the bone in rain, and just looking so grimy and worn out, and bloodshot eyes. And he's staking out things. He's not using really any kind of crazy high tech or any like Batman trademark stuff. He's just out there, just pounding the pavement, hiding himself in nooks and crannies, and being like an urban explorer almost. And he's really putting this hard, exhausting work into his, crime fighting. And that was one scene that really, and they're doing this as they're doing this. You kind of hear the ending montage of, Nirvana, Something in the Way, which the melancholy, monotone tune fits the depression and melancholy of Bruce and Gotham City itself so well.
Mhm. Would you say that Pattinson's Batman in this movie is now your favorite Batman? Which was your least favorite version of Batman?
Golly, Pattinson's Batman is now my only interpretation that is valid for Bruce. I mean, maybe aside from maybe the 2004 series of the Batman, which I kind of liked for design, but that was it. But as for rich characterization and portrayal, Pattinson will be the only canon I want to accept right now. Most hand down favorite Batman. Please sign him on for more. I know it's taxing, Robert, but you can do it. Please make at least another movie. Um, my least favorite Batman, probably, fanboys are going to hate me, but I don't care. It's probably going to be it's going to be a three-way between Keaton, Clooney, and Bale. I give Affleck a pass because look at what Snyder gave him to work with. I think Affleck did a pretty well job. He really nailed the "I'm a jackass" through and through, and I'm just this mean, bitter, rich jackass, and I'm just so hell bent on destroying, poor Superman, then I just become monstrous. So Affleck did a wonderful job. He did kind of a good job, I think, with kind of trying to redeem himself in Justice League, although he just looked weird in the suit, not gonna lie. No one really looks good
Mhm.
in that suit. Ironically, Pattinson looked wonderful in that suit. He actually looked better in the suit, expressing his expressions through the mask than out of it at times.
Interesting.
Yeah, so Patterson favorite, least favorite, Clooney, Keaton, and Bale.
Right. So how did you find Batman's relationship with Catwoman? I think it was one of the highlights, right?
It was definitely one of the highlights, definitely one of my most favorite parts of this movie. The relationship between Bruce and Selina was beautifully done. It was developed from beginning to an open ending very beautifully. We first start out, there's this initial distrust from Selena, but this curiosity from Bruce, and then it gets juxtaposed because you know now he's not sure what to make of Selena at times, but now she's curious to know who is this man behind the mask. Who is this determined force of nature underneath this cloak of darkness. And I think she, despite Bruce wearing the whole Batman persona and mask, she really sees his humanity. And they also have, I guess, throw out a spoiler there, they have some non-visual conversations over communication devices, and I think it reveals a lot about their personalities, and she learns more about him, and she's very fascinated by him because she hasn't met anybody like him before, and neither has he her.
Mhm. Yes, from the clips I've seen, they definitely have an amazing chemistry.
They certainly do. I mean, it is like a beautiful musical composition. He will play one note, she will play one note in key, she will play a note, he will play one in key. And, even just the body language is done so beautifully and subtly. And there is this fluid, almost feline grace to their body language and chemistry and reactions. And, there's just this wonderful opening of Bruce's dark, hardened, empty heart, just kind of It's like, oh my gosh, I have feelings. Oh my gosh, I think I'm falling in love with this woman. Help, help. He's panicking internally, And she's like, I think I've actually met somebody decent that I like. Oh no, what do I do with that? And it was just so beautifully done. Like at first she's very distrustful, she's very combative, if you will, but he's very persistent. He's very persistent. He pursues and will not let go. And even though the ending doesn't quite unite them, it does give us this beautiful potential. And I also do kind of like, maybe I don't know what to think of it. It reminds me a lot of your character Joel. I do like how Bruce is, he doesn't show it in front of her, but subconsciously and psychologically he is a little jealous and possessive of Selena.
Oh, that's interesting. You wouldn't expect it from him because he's so aloof.
Right, he's so aloof and he seems so detached, but I mean, he got really mad when he thought that she had something going on with a mob boss. And I mean, he was like really like really mad.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah. But she didn't, so he was relieved.
Mhm.
Um and he'll keep an eye on her, like, just to
Mhm.
make sure she's all right, but also hope there's not another guy in the picture, he's thinking.
I think we should have a separate podcast in the future about Catwoman and Batman as a couple, to continue our writing romantic couples series.
We should. It is a good, writers take note, watch this movie and learn how to write a good romance couple.
Mhm.
Yes.
So, how did you find this Batman compared to The Dark Knight from 2008, as well as the Snyderverse portrayals of Batman? I think we already covered this a little bit, so you can just summarize it in maybe 2 or 3 sentences.
Okay, so comparing this Batman to Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, Pattinson's portrayal under the brilliant direction of Matt Reeves is by far more heartfelt. It is broken, it is vulnerable. Nolan did a beautiful job setting up the Batman world, setting up the rogues gallery, and setting up the complexities of the gray morality of Gotham. However, Bale's performance felt too laser focused, it felt too mechanical, and he felt too much like a heartless, relentless, opportunistic type of person who was kind of on a moral high ground. And I felt very little warmth or depth or vulnerability or relatability to Bale's performance. I disliked him as Bruce Wayne period, as Batman period. A lot of people did like the edgier, darker portrayal, but honestly, Pattinson delivers the darkest and edgiest one of all. But he does it with beauty, heart, and a wonderful brokenness of softness and vulnerability as well.
Mhm. How
And
about Snyderverse?
Snyderverse. Okay, given the fact what Affleck had to work with Snyder, I can definitely see that Snyder, although he tries to portray Bruce thinking in the right way, I don't think he quite loves Batman as much as he does Superman, which is kind of evident. But Snyder's Batman with Ben Affleck, it felt right. It felt, all it ticked off all the boxes of comic canon and everything. But this this Bruce just felt like he was focused on proving a point or trying to prevent something. I didn't really feel like he cared about the safety or vulnerability of Gotham City. He was more interested in eliminating a threat, and he blindly thinks that Superman is a threat. He doesn't bother to investigate or try to get to know the context of the person he's going against. He's like, "Oh, he had powers. Oh, he fought this alien and caused all this death and destruction. He's bad. He's a terrible threat. Let's kill him." And he kind of became demonized in a way. And plus, he's pretty ruthless with criminals and doing like sadistic stuff with them. So he became more of a sadistic, authoritarian powerhouse under Affleck, which worked really well because then Snyder tries to redeem him in Justice League, and it worked a little bit well. But I feel like, if you've done $100 worth of damage and you're trying to pay back 10, it's not going to work. So
Mhm.
Affleck's heavily flawed. Had more heart than Bale, but I mean, if I wanted canon jackass Bruce, I guess go with Affleck. But for real, honest to goodness, human being, protect this man at all cost. He has a heart. Pattinson for the win.
Mhm. Right, that makes a lot of sense. So, what do you think of the villains in this film? I mean, I don't think we should go into too much detail about it because of spoilers, but how did you find their portrayal, especially compared to other incarnations of Batman?
Compared to other incarnations, the hyperrealism was wonderfully striking. It removed them from comic book designs and cartoons into actual flesh and blood criminals that could be very real, that could just happen right there. And they feel like they were based on real criminals. I was happy to see the Penguin, usually parodied as, kind of a smarmy, nasally voiced midget, if you will, if you pardon the nasty expression, into kind of a kind of a conniving mob boss, like trying to, act like he's your friend but he's not, and just this conniving type of person. Just sort of feels like your typical, mafizio. um and I guess not to go into too much detail, but the Riddler himself just felt like a real deranged killer brought on by weird childhood trauma, and very frightening, like real actual serial killers. Like, I'm sort of I sort of look into crime series and documentaries, since I'm kind of a huge fan of BuzzFeed Unsolved and other things like it. And a lot of these patterns of serial killers is just exactly like the Riddler. And it's very frightening, it's very real, it's very compelling. And, it did not feel like some, giddy Saturday morning cartoon villain, but an actual deranged serial killer doing things like the Zodiac killer mixed with the Unabomber or something.
Mhm. That really matches the overall theme and feel of the movie.
It does. It does. I love this movie for its hyper realism. I didn't feel like I was watching a superhero movie. It felt more like it was a crime cop drama that just had some, like crazy elements, and like I said, the reason Bruce wears this is to inflict fear upon the criminals.
Mhm.
It's just the theatricality of it.
Mhm. What did you think of the cinematography? Did it fit the theme of the movie?
The cinematography was perfect. I will say the only flaw was at times it seemed a little too dim. However, it wasn't a movie theater, and I think the movie theater people forgot to dim down the lights properly. So some scenes were a little hard to see. Um, but overall, the grittiness, the textured tone, and this kind of not sepia, but somewhat sepia tone, um, it it had this beautiful feeling like you were trapped in the grittiness of the 90s, but it was very modern feeling at the same time, but it also felt a little retro, like you're caught in that terrible time between the late 80s and 90s when the economy sucks, and you're just this, broke, you're just this broke latchkey kid, and
Mhm.
you live in a slum. I mean, from personal experience, the movie felt, it hit me like a depressed childhood. That was how good it was, and I could feel the chill of the morning air. I could feel the dirt of the city, just the sickening decay, and beautiful shots, that just matched movement and tone so beautifully. And then, of course, the big action scenes were done very well, like the car chase scene. Not gonna lie, beautifully done. Like you felt like you were riding in that car ready to die.
Mhm. Yes, and it does seem very good. I mean, it's good when a movie has, matching cinematography, not just, the themes and the characters, but the mood, the scenes and how they they fold out. It really adds to the general feel.
It does, and the impressive thing too about the direction and characterization along in tandem with the cinematography is that it evokes this sense of living and feeling, not just aesthetics or not just trying to do emotional shorthand, um, but actual living, flesh and blood, a heartbeat. And that's something I just want to put a little minor critique. I know they're two different animals. It's like comparing apples to oranges. I feel like that's where Snyderverse falls, because Snyderverse looks like a beautiful painting, but it never really feels truly alive. Like you don't feel like you're going to get any blood or grit or tears from it.
I think Snyderverse, from what you've told me, seems more like a modern mythology than
It's
something
more
realistic.
it's more of a modern mythology. It's very operatic. Like I
Mhm.
and I guess it doesn't, I mean, I guess it maybe stems from the fact that Snyder was originally an artist and not a filmmaker, so
Mm.
maybe I tend to think he thinks as an artist, like through an artist lens, and not as a, director of, the nuanced emotions. Like he can do nuanced emotions pretty good, but it's only in snapshot scenes, and he can never do a collective characterization, which is why I think a lot of people, unless they were going for a modern space opera mythology thing, I think they wanted something with a little bit more, blood and grit in it.
Right. How was the score like?
The score for the Batman was exceptional. I don't understand anyone's criticism of it. It was beautifully rich, evocative. It was weighed with heavy dark tones, like an enveloping seductive dark chocolate tone, and it felt rooted in the romanticism of Verdi and Beethoven. Um, but then at the same time, it had sensibilities of crime noir, and it ironically used two ironic musical compositions woven into its themes. The first was this very dragged out, like a Doomer remix version of Schubert's Ave Maria, which just kind of dragged down to like these heavy beats that almost sounded like a dying heartbeat. And then, ironically, you have the monotone, melancholy drudge tone of Nirvana's Something in the Way being folded into a classical composition with a swelling orchestra that fades away at the end. It's beautiful. The score was just rich. Props to Giacomo, probably butchered his name. I'm sorry, my Italian's rusty. For a beautiful score, it was gorgeous. It was gorgeous, just rich. This is what a Batman theme should be: subtle, nuanced,
Mhm.
rich, heavy, seductive.
Beautifully described.
Thank you. That's how it is. That's how I hope people will see this movie.
Right. So how many stars will you give this movie?
I know most reviews have a 5-star review. I want to give it 25 stars. That is how good it is. This is
Wow.
a monumental achievement done by not only like just cinematography, but anybody doing a DC movie. I hope they do more of this hyper realism. I hope they do more of this stripped down minimalism, and I hope they get directors and casts who know what they're doing, and make the characters into believable humans. I hope they do that. I really hope they do, because this is a beautiful testimony of what you can do with iconic characters and stories. You can make them so human that you forget they're a comic book or they're a comic character. They feel like, real human beings that you sympathize, and you're like, oh, protect them, like, oh no, not Bruce and Selena, no.
Mhm.
This is what the aim of actors and directors should aim for.
Absolutely. And you've enunciated and explained this so well. I think, we should really do more movie reviews in the future.
I think we should. Cinematography, I mean, film has a wonderful way of exploring things that sometimes prose or other mediums cannot achieve. And I think it's beautiful how storytelling can be done and characterization can be done through film.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. I hope you will get to see it soon.
I will. I think it's coming out on streaming services in a week.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. Please watch it and let me know what you think of it.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much.